I know, reason 10,001 why this was a bad idea to put it in the basement. My name's Callie, I'm the Okayest Engineer, and I didn't know I could be this excited about a piece of foam. Let's get this thing built. A quick reminder, and for anyone new to the channel, the carbon fiber seat giveaway is still active and going on till January 31st Eastern Standard Time. Go visit the first link in the description, make a comment on that video, and you're automatically entered to win. Now back to the video. This may be one of the more sketchy things I've ever done, taking home 5 huge sheets of foam from Home Depot, but don't worry. It was all surface streets, I never got faster than 25 miles an hour, and as you can see here, I made it home just fine. I do, though, have a massive problem of never asking for help, and so I end up doing things that I probably shouldn't be doing and would be way easier than if I just had an extra set of hands. And for all of you that say the basement is a horrible place to build all this stairwell was basically made for a 4x8 piece of plywood. It fits perfectly down the stairs. So the next step for this is to cut these down into more manageable pieces. We're going to use 4-inch height sections based on the learnings we had from the last time, where 6-inch pieces didn't fit underneath the gantry of the CNC machine. So that's why we're down to 4. But anyways, cut these into more manageable chunks, glue them together to make those 4-inch heights. We're going to use Gorilla Glue this time. Last time, if you remember, we used 3M Super 77 and that ended up delaminating. A couple of you guys suggested using Gorilla Glue. This goes down and actually expands and should make a better bond and shouldn't leave any voids. So I'm curious to see how that's going to work. So we'll glue those together. And then I also got an extra bucket, Home Depot bucket. I mentioned in the first video, I think, we needed more capacity on this thing. So because of the amount of foam that we're going to be cutting over the next few days, I figured it'd be better to have more capacity. So we'll fix that and get that going as well. And yeah, let's get these things cut up, put together, glued together, and it's going to be a lot of time on this CNC router. And there you have it. You can kind of see just how big this mold is going to be. Sitting next to the helicopter, you can also see how I'm going to glue each set of those together, and those will make each part, and then we'll machine these things out, and I hope it's actually just going to go together kind of like Legos and give me a nice mold that will fit on the back of the helicopter. So let's get these things glued up and start cutting some foam. And just real quick, for someone who, like me, may not have known a good way to cut this foam, I used a saw to cut it the first time, as you probably saw in the seat video. This stuff scores really well with just an X-Acto knife. It actually comes with some pre-manufactured cuts at like 24 inches because, you know, construction. But basically all you have to do is score this with an X-Acto knife or a razor knife, and then it makes a nice seam. And then once you have the seam, you can basically just break it. So way faster than using a saw, and works pretty well. So one last thing before I wanted to go glue these together, I oriented each one of these pairs in a way that these pre-cuts weren't lining up with each other. I don't know if it would be a problem, but I figured this is probably better anyways. And so that's just, I don't know, something I'm trying to do to make sure I don't have issues in the future. All right. Considering this is the first time I've ever used this Gorilla Glue, I'm not really sure how it's going to work. The instructions say to activate it by putting water down or misting both surfaces before you put the glue down. And then it says that this glue will expand 3 to 4 times the volume. So I want to use a decent amount, but probably not too much. We're also going to put weight on it just to make sure it doesn't fully expand, but a small amount of pressure on this area will lift a lot of weight, so I want to be careful about that. There's also some thin features on these parts, and I want to make sure that those features have enough glue so those don't delaminate. So I'm going to go a little bit based on memory and probably put a little bit more glue in those areas that I think need to really stick together. And then we'll just go from there. I guess if it does delaminate after it's machined, I can add some more glue, and we're gonna hand feather this whole mold anyway. So it's got to be close, but it doesn't have to be perfect. So yeah, we'll get into it. I'm gonna mist these first with some water, and then throw down some glue, put them together, and we'll go from there. And there they are. I threw some pavers on top that were left over from the backyard just to add a little bit of extra weight and hold these things down while the glue foams, and hopefully will prevent those parts from separating. I do have a couple more that I need to finish, but I didn't think it was worth pulling extra pavers over when I have plenty of machine time and left in these. And so while I'm machining, I'll glue up a couple more, and we'll just use these pavers that are already here. And that leaves us with just one last thing to do before we start machining. I need to get this bucket mounted to that one and sealed up so that I can double the capacity of my particle separator. And then I need to do some house cleaning. This place is a mess from doing all the sanding on this heat mold. So I got to clean up. We need to put some new blue tape down on the deck of the CNC router so that we can use the same method we did last time, which is double-sided sticky tape to hold the mold to the machine. So we'll get into that and then start cutting some foam. Pretty stoked about it. So I'm either really lucky or this helicopter was basically made for this CNC router. So the pieces that I'm making have a max Y dimension of 38.5 inches. And I just checked the total travel of this thing. You know, why not check it before I start designing parts? But anyways, I just checked it tonight, and it turns out, you saw it, 39.75 inches. So I basically have 38.5 to 39.74, an inch and a quarter to play with to get these parts machined out on this CNC router. So pretty close. Stoked I got lucky. Better be lucky than good. And let's get started. It gets worse. So I found one that had a dimension of 39.5, I think, ish. So I pulled the G-code in to Excel, sorted it, found the max and min. Max is 1,001 millimeters, min is negative 5.93, converted to American units, and added together 39.64 inches. And we have 39.75 to work with. Pretty freaking close. But at least I don't have to fix it, so we'll let it rip. All right, I think we're ready to go. I've checked everything that I can think to check, and I don't think we're going to have any issues. I'm only going to use 9 pieces of double-sided tape on this thing. There isn't much tool loading. I'm taking a gamble. I think it's going to work. I hope it's going to work. If it doesn't work, it's just a couple dollars in foam, and we'll do it again. And once again, I have so much work, it's not going to slow me down. So nine pieces of double-sided foam. I'm going to slip that in there. I have the machine right now all the way forward, and then actually minus about 1/4 of an inch, because that's how much travel I have in the G-code. So I need to place this thing exactly where the spindle is right now. That's going to be my 0, which is back in this corner. That way I know that the machine has its max travel on the material for what I'm making. So we'll go ahead and do that now. I'm going to place the part. We'll actually dial in the exact 0 for the part, and then it's just, I think, hit and go. All right, it's the moment of truth. All that's left is to turn on the spindle and hit go. So we'll start out slow, cross our fingers, hope I did all my homework, and hopefully we end up with some good parts. I watched the first pass, which does an outline of the shadow of the part, and we did this pretty slow. And once this was finished, I knew that that was the max travel of the machine. And so once it was good, I just let her go. Well, the first one came out all right. This was by far the most complicated one that we'll be doing. As you can see, there were some casualties, so it kicked some foam off and ruined a couple pieces, but I was counting on at least losing a couple. There's also a few in here that I'll do a close-up for that you can see. But overall, I'd say it's a success. All of this is held together. I only went down. I didn't go all the way through the foam. So there's a 1/4 inch of foam holding all this together. So we'll pull this off and cut those off. and then it'll all come out, and then I'll save what I can out of these small pieces, and then whatever obviously got ruined, then I'll just make one more small batch, use more glue to hold it better together, and just basically rerun the ones that I've lost. So overall, I think it's okay. Would have been better to have them all, but we'll fix it. It'll be all right. With the part off the machine, all that was left to do was to take a razor blade and cut that 1/4 inch film between each part. After that was done, then it was just a matter of finishing off that trim and trying to match the contour of the part to what I was cutting off the bottom of the piece. So this is what we ended up with after the first, I guess, CNC cut, minus the casualties you can see here. Overall turned out pretty good. I'm actually pretty stoked with how good my model was, because these fit pretty much exactly how I wanted them to. And so from the bulkhead back, I think we're going to be great. But I'm having kind of a change of heart on these small pieces. So for example, these come and fit this way and will go forward. And I don't know, when I was designing them, I was favoring the contour of the body. And because I only have a 3-axis CNC and it can only machine basically in a vertical orientation, all this is overhang. So even though the interior surfaces line up great, the exterior surfaces have a huge step in them. You can see here, a big old step. And so they fit nice against the fuselage, but the surface that I actually care about, which is on the outside, I don't have anything to go off of. So I'm gonna have to hand massage that and try to get that as best as I can, and I just don't think that's the right way to do it. So I think I'm gonna redo all the interior, or all these smaller pieces that go forward. I'm gonna orient them in the CAM software so that it actually surfs the good surface, the outside surface, and then I'll deal with trying to fit it to the actual fuselage. I also think to hold these things on, I think we're gonna have to use some expandable foam or something to make all of the inside better, but we don't care about that, right? All we care about is the outer surface. So, I mean, you learn, you make mistakes, you figure it out. That's basically what this is all about, trying to just figure out how to do something that you've never done before. So, we'll keep machining the bulkhead pieces going back all the way to the tail, and while that's all running, I think I'm gonna get back into CAD and try and figure out a better way to do these smaller pieces going forward. So this is another spot where I encountered the limitation of just having a 3-axis CNC router. You can see here the profile has a gap. That's because the boom is tapered. It gets larger as it goes forward. And so this dimension, this circle, is actually correct for where this should meet the fuselage, or meet the tail boom. But it's getting hung up on the front side because obviously it needs to be bigger on that end. So I need to take this back off, and I'm just gonna basically hand taper it with some sandpaper. So I'll show you how I plan to hopefully do that without losing the nice location where I'm trying to keep. So once again, the only area I'm concerned about is the edge at the side that's supposed to touch the tail boom. So I'm painting just that edge with a permanent marker. That way I know as I'm sanding the other side that if I ever touch the edge that's important, that Sharpie will start to go away and it'll tell me to stop. And who doesn't like a little build montage that turns what took over 2 days into just a minute? And the final step in this whole process is to glue each one of those pieces that we just machined together. I did it in a couple phases just because I wanted to make sure the pressure that I was putting on top was going to match kind of the area that's on bottom. So I didn't want to get too narrow and then have a whole bunch of weight just sitting on a small area. So that's why you see I did it in a couple phases. And then finally I got them all together and we were good to go. Also, a quick note on the Gorilla Glue. It worked 100 times better than the Super 77 spray adhesive. It's got a great bond. It foamed up to fill a void. It wasn't too crazy. It didn't try to lift my parts or to separate the parts. Overall, a much better idea. Thanks for the suggestions. I'll definitely use this going forward. All right, now that we have this all glued up, it's time to get it on the helicopter. I honestly haven't test fitted anything yet because I want to see what it was going to look like completely stacked and built. So this is the first time it'll be going on the helicopter, which I'm excited and nervous about. It looks way bigger than I imagined, so I hope the proportions are right, but it looked good in CAD, so we're going to give it a shot. So we got to put it on through the back or through the tail boom. It's heavy. It's like, I don't know, probably 40 pounds. So yeah, I don't really know how this is going to go, but we're going to try. And there's two more pieces that aren't glued on yet. So this is going to come in here. It's got to go forward about an inch. Let's see if we can get it there. Would you look at that? Come on. A little further. I hope I can get it back off. Oh, it's pretty snug. All right. How do we look? Oh, looks sick. Let's go. So good. Oh, I'm stoked. The lines look great. I think this contour is actually really nice. Oh, it looks sick. This is going to work. Oh, heck yeah. Let's go. All right. So I think this is going to generate a few questions. So I'm going to try and answer a few of them here. This is not finished yet. This is still coming. There will eventually be a scoop on both sides for air inlet up here. The reason it's not on here, and I don't think I'm going to put it on the fuselage at all. I think that part's actually going to be done later once I pull all of this off, because I don't want to have to deal with laying the carbon fiber up in a tight spot and try to get these contours. I think that's going to be a disaster. So once I pull this off, I can add that other plug of the mold, and it'll come all the way across the top. I won't have any of this in my way. And then when I'm actually doing the layup, it'll just be super easy and smooth. And then I can, once it's all cured and I pull the carbon fiber part out, I can easily trim to this geometry, and I don't have to worry about the complexity in the mold. So that is going to stay open probably for a while until I at least get the mold pulled off the bottom section. The other part of this is what's going on down here. So I wanted the overall teardrop to be correct. And to get that, I knew I wanted the outlet, the back end of this to sit around here. That's going to mimic, once again, that MD500 type of teardrop I'm looking for. But if I took the existing geometry from the fuselage, you can see this line down here. This line would have put that hole like way up here. And that's not what I was going for. So the easiest way to fix that is to create my own new line. And so I needed to get a new body line starting from here and then basically come up the way you see it here. So this will just be an open void. It's just going to be cosmetic. It's just going to fill in this hole, and it's going to give me something to create a new body line that will hopefully be pretty seamless. And once it's done, I don't think you're going to be able to tell, but it'll go from basically right here and then continue out the back, once again to create that teardrop shape that I'm looking for with what I already have. So we're going to fill these in next with a few more pieces of foam and get that all filled in. And once this is all finished, then we'll sand it all, we'll blend it all, and then the hard part starts where we actually develop or start producing a mold on this thing. So I went ahead and flipped the parts over in CAD and then reran the CAM software so that we surf the exterior surface of these parts. So once again, this is the side that we care about. The disadvantage though now is I have all this material back here. You can kind of see by this one how thin this is. I have all this material over here that I'm going to have to cut away somehow and get it to fit to the fuselage. So what we're going to do next though is we're going to cut these blocks out and get them off the spare piece of foam that we started with, and then I'm just going to give it a shot. I figured I'd do these 4 first, and if this works well, then we'll continue with the rest. Otherwise, I don't know, we'll figure something else out. And here are the two side by side. So this was the first one I machined, and you can see the interior contour is actually really nice. But when we come out to the outside, you see all these steps, and it's really just junk. And then on the other side, this is the new one where the exterior surface is, I mean, perfect, sweet. It all lines up and it's pretty. Ignore that. Don't just ignore it. It's fine. But the inside has a whole bunch of extra foam. And then while I was cutting these things off, the other ones came off the machine. So those are the following, I guess, 7 that are going to go forward even of these 3. So it'll go kind of further up. All right. So change of plans again. I cut the bulk out of this because I know this is good and this is good. I know it needs to be thin, and if I put it up against here, excuse the noise, it looks pretty good, but it's so flimsy. Let's see if I can do this right. It's so flimsy that there's just no way I'm gonna ever get this thing to be right. So I don't think this is gonna work. So I'm back to this because I know most of this is right. And this at least fits up against the fuselage in a way that it's kind of stiff, so I can do some body work on it. So I can fill the thickness of this foam with some other filler. I'm probably going to use, someone made a suggestion, awesome suggestion by the way, use drywall putty, because it'll go on nice and it will sand fairly easily and it'll probably match the consistency of the foam. So thanks a lot for that one. But anyways, I think I'm going to cut this off. So this is gone. I'm going to mount this rigidly, and then there are some voids. I'll probably fill the voids with some expandable foam or something to make it good. I know that this line, this contour on this side is good. And then I know this line is good. And the rest of this is just positive material. And so what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to mark the line from this side all the way up as far as I need it to go. And then if I successfully, we'll find out, if I can connect this line to this edge, then it should be relatively close to the contour that I'm looking for. So once again, this edge I know is good, this edge I know is good, and I'll do that the same stacking down. And so then hopefully I'll have something I can fill off of, and then I'll just finish it with putty, drywall mud, and feather it in real nice and make it look pretty. So I don't know, round 3, I guess. To get these pieces glued together, I just used a whole bunch of toothpicks to hold them in place while the glue dried. I also used a pretty generous amount of the Gorilla Glue just to make sure this was nice and sturdy going forward, considering how small these pieces were. and all, it's just got to be close. I'm going to have to hand massage this all to the body in the future anyways. All right, I got all these glued up best I could. It's not perfect, but I don't think it needs to be. So now that we have this rough shape, let's go see how it'll fit on the fuselage. I realized as I went to go fit this to the fuselage that this internal sharp edge was interfering with the radius on the actual fuselage. So that's what I just did there. I just cut that off so it wouldn't interfere and it would fit a little bit better. All right. Now, oh yeah, that's way better. So yeah, once again, I don't think this is perfect, but this will give me something to start from. We're gonna have to permanently mount this, or semi-permanently mount this to the fuselage and make it a little bit more rigid. I'm either gonna use maybe some hot glue, or as I mentioned before, some expanding foam to fill in those voids. The main goal is just to make sure that it's rigid enough so that we can do some body work. And I'm trying not to be too jank. I know people have made these things out of purely expanding foam, which to me just seems like, I don't know, it works, but it's just not to the level that I'm trying to do this. So anyways, I think we have a path forward, and we'll see if we can make this work as best we can. All right, now that we have a decent plan for what to do on those lower pieces, I think we need to stop and take a bit of a pivot. There's still some issues with the fuselage that need to get fixed before it's ready to paint. For example, there's a pretty decent sized flange here that needs to get sanded down to the fuselage. There's some issues in this back tail boom section that needs to get sanded and then filled with some fairing compound. And basically, I want to get the fuselage more closely to where we are ready for paint so that any of these issues that are currently present won't show up in the mold. So I think that's what we're going to do next. We're also going to pull these 3D dots off, and then actually we're going to cover the majority of this area just with blue 2-inch tape. And the reason for that is, well, a couple. I don't want any of the glue or expanding foam or anything to adhere to the gel coat of the actual fuselage. And so this will give me that barrier. Blue tape, as far as my experience goes, does a pretty good job at releasing things like fiberglass or resin or epoxy. So it shouldn't stick very well to the tape. Even if it does stick to the tape, that's a barrier between the whatever I'm doing in the fuselage. So it'll rip the tape off before it messes up the gel coat on the fuselage. So we're going to cover a pretty significant portion of this area with blue tape just to protect it. There's also the second reason. So this tape is, I measured it, it's about 5 thousandths thick. 3 layers of carbon fiber, which is what I think I'm going to plan to use on this surface, is about 100th or 10 thousandths per layer. So basically 6 layers of tape will make that thickness. And so I need the mold surface that we're going to end up making to step off of this actual surface by the thickness of the carbon that we're making. And so that is what this tape is going to basically represent. It's going to represent the thickness of the final amount of carbon that we're going to lay onto this surface so that that surface will actually mate up to the body correctly. So that's what we're going to do next. We're going to take a bit of a break. This is going to be a lot more annoying and not near as much fun as doing mold work, but I need to get the fuselage a little bit further along and better represent where we need to paint. So that's next. So there's one more thing that I actually forgot to consider. I also need to sand this flange that connects the boom to the fuselage down. And between that and all the body work that I have to do, it's probably going to make this place a hot mess. And I'd prefer to do that down in the dirty portion of my basement. You can also tell now that with the boom on, the helicopter is far too long to be able to flip a 180, and that the dirty portion of my basement is actually not very long. So I'd prefer to get the nose in there rather than the tail. I know, reason 10,001 why this was a bad idea to put it in the basement, but because I can't turn it around, I'm going to have to pull the boom off. In my opinion, it's not a big deal. It's 16 bolts or something like that, but we're going to pull the boom off. We're going to get it down into the dirty portion of the basement, and once we're all done with the body work, we can just throw the boom back on. And right when you guys thought you had me, it just took a little bit of thinking outside the box, literally, before I figured out how to get this thing turned around without taking it off. Win on my part. Ha! That's going to do it for this one. Thanks for sticking around. Feel free to leave a message, a suggestion, anything in the comment section below. I appreciate all the feedback. As always, go build something cool, never stop learning, and we'll see you on the next one.